I've been using my traditional MiSTer stack long enough. It's time for an upgrade. Today, I'm going to tear down my MiSTer stack and transplant it over to the MiSTer Mini Console. So stick around and I'm going to show you how you can build this beautiful MiSTer device for your entertainment center. Right now I have two different MiSTer devices that I use. The first is my MiSTer multi-system. I bought it back in 2022 and I've really been enjoying it. I love the way it looks and really dig some of its features such as simultaneous VGA and HDMI output. But I've had some challenges with multiplayer snack compatibility, so the multi-system stays in my office where I mainly use it for computer cores. By the way, if you're curious about my experience with multiplayer snacks, check out my video on that topic. There, I walk through a couple of different multiplayer snack adapters to see how they worked in various configurations. So right now in my entertainment center, hooked up to my projector, I use a traditional MiSTer stack configuration, and for the most part it works great. But there are some things that make it a little inconvenient. For example, the snack port is near the top of the device, so when I connect the level shifter and a snack adapter, the stack becomes top heavy and topples over. Also, the USB ports are on the side of the stack, so the wires get bent when they get pulled on. And honestly, as great as the system is, it doesn't really score too high in the aesthetics department. But fortunately, these are all things that the MiSTer Mini Console addresses. Now, I came across this project when browsing around on printables a little while back, and it really jumped out at me. This MiSTer variation was designed by Todd Gill, who's also known as RetroFrog. Todd has some other really nice designs. I definitely recommend taking a look at his project portfolio. He also has a full-sized MiSTer console, which houses an entire MiSTer stack and even makes room for an external hard drive. This is really nice work, but it's a little bit big for what I want, so I'm going to build the mini version. As you can see, it's a bit smaller than his full-size design, but it incorporates 3 front-facing USB ports by using a third-party USB hub. Now, to build this console, you're going to need a few parts. First, you'll need the standard DE10 Nano board, as well as one of the I/O boards that sits on top of it. The design also uses a third-party USB hub, so we'll need one of these as well. This is made by the company MakerSpot, and you can pick it up on Amazon for $8. And you'll also need one of these micro SD card expansion adapters. Now, I've never seen one of these before, but it's a neat idea. You can pick these up as a 4-pack from Amazon for $16, which I was happy to do because I thought of a couple of other projects that I can use these on. You also need this angled HDMI extension cable. This will carry the HDMI port out to the back of the console where it belongs. This was around $9 on Amazon. In addition to the HDMI cable, you need a right-angled USB cable as well, and also a right-angled power cable. You'll also need this specific power switch, which I got from DigiKey for around $3, as well as this threaded power jack connector. And lastly, you'll need a variety of M2 and M3 screws. These are all listed in the printables page for this build, along with the screw sizes and quantities. So go check out the link in the description to the project page for the details on the parts you need. The total cost for all the parts was around $62, and that's not including the cost of the MiSTer's DE10 Nano and I/O boards. Keep in mind, however, that some of these parts come in multiples, so the price per part is actually closer to around $35. Oh, and we can't forget the 3D printed shell. There's both a top and a bottom piece, as well as a few smaller pieces for the power switch and buttons. Now, Todd included both a single color and a multicolor version of the model, and even though I don't have a multicolor extruder, I think the multicolor model looks so great that I decided to go ahead and do a multicolor print with manual filament swaps, which is no fun at all, but I think it's worth it in the end. And for this print, I decided to try out some new filament that's gotten some good reviews on Amazon. This brand is called Wellshow, and a spool of this light gray PET G was only $14. Now, I normally use Prusament, but with as much printing as I do, I'm in the market for a less expensive filament that I can have delivered quickly when I need it. If you have any filament recommendations, by the way, please let me know in the comments. I'd be interested in trying out a few different brands. For the second color, I went with some Prusament Galaxy Black PET G. I thought it might give a nice sheen to the MiSTer logo on top of the case. I ended up printing the case at a 200 micron layer height with a total print time of around 19 hours or so. I couldn't quite squeeze both pieces onto the bed of my Prusa MK3S with supports enabled, so I did have to do separate print jobs for both the top and the bottom halves. I also went with the Galaxy Black for the power switch and the buttons to complement the multicolor lid. There's also a vertical stand included in the project, so I went ahead and printed that in Galaxy Black as well. Alright, now that all the case parts are printed, it's time to start the assembly. To start off, I went ahead and disassembled my old MiSTer stack. Okay, then I began the new build by mounting the DE10 Nano board into the bottom of the case using the standoffs that came with it. On the underside of the case, I used 8mm tapered M3 screws. Then the I/O board attaches to the top and screws into the standoffs. By the way, I have the digital I/O board on my build, but if you have the analog version, that should fit right in as well. The user port on the I/O board should line up perfectly with the hole in the back of the shell. I then tackled the power cables. I started off by first attaching the power jack to the case. And I then soldered the black wire from the angled power plug to the sleeve of the power jack. After that, I soldered the red wire to one of the leads on the power switch. It doesn't really matter which one you choose here. And I connected the other lead to the center pin on the power jack. This puts the power switch in circuit with the 5 volts coming from the power adapter. And fortunately, I remembered to slip on some heat shrink before soldering all this together, so I used some hot air to shrink it. Then I attached the switch to the mounting bracket with a couple of M2.5 screws. And slipped on the power switch cover before mounting the bracket to the case with 2 6mm M3 screws. Next, I turned my attention to the USB ports. I started by removing the PCB from the MakerSpot USB hub. Once removed, I desoldered the existing USB cable and cut the USB-A connector off of the USB extension cable. I then stripped it back and soldered the extension cable to the USB board where the old connector was. And then used another 6mm M3 screw with a washer to mount the USB hub board to the case. The front 3 USB ports align with the holes in front of the case perfectly. One nice side benefit of using this USB hub is there's a port on the inside of the case, which is perfect for a wireless networking adapter. Next, I mounted the micro SD card adapter to the case using 2 more M2.5 screws, and then inserted the other end of the adapter into the micro SD slot on the DE10 Nano. The last piece here is the HDMI port. This cable gets attached to the rear of the case with 2 more 6mm M3 screws. Okay, with everything attached, I went ahead and plugged in the HDMI plug, the power plug, and the USB hub. I then placed down the buttons and closed it up with 4 25mm M3 screws. And we can't forget the rubber feet to prevent it from sliding around. Yeah, this is such a nice looking design. It really cleans up the MiSTer stack and makes it look much more attractive when it's sitting in a public space. And it also looks great in the vertical stand as well. After placing it in my entertainment center, it looks right at home with my other consoles. And of course, we need to try it out to make sure everything is working.
It's me, Mario! Hello! Okie dokie.
Dear Mario, please come to the airport. Yours truly, Princess Toadstool.
Yeah! 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 Let's go! Here we go!
Well, I just couldn't be happier with the way this project turned out. It looks amazing. A special thanks goes out to RetroFrog for making this wonderful model available to the community on printables for other people to enjoy. And by the way, if you want one of these and don't have a 3D printer yourself, Todd told me that he plans on selling them in the January or February timeframe. So you can check out his storefront on stoneagegamer.com and purchase one when they're available. Well, that's all I have for today. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. But until then, go make something cool.